All right, I think it's 3 o'clock, so we can start. Hello and welcome everybody to today's session on how Microsoft Teams revolutionizes the VDI landscape with Windows Virtual Desktop. I'm happy to see so many faces here visiting my session, and I hope you learned something valuable for your daily business today when we talk about how Microsoft Teams can support that, especially when talking about your Windows Virtual Desktop landscapes. So let's start with what does revolutionizing actually mean in the terms of a Windows Virtual Desktop? Or first and foremost, what is the actual definition of Oxford? And when we define, or when we have to define revolutionizes, we could say that it's a forcible overthrow of a social order in favor of a new system. And okay, that's the general definition, but what does that have to do with WVD or any kind of VDI system and Microsoft Teams? And my actual definition for that would be it's a change in the way multi-user systems are interacting with high-featured collaboration tools, which means that we see there's a huge pace in the development of those tools like WVD, the media frames or the feature set in general. And this is what I see. And that's the reason why we are taking the topic on revolutionizing. And what do I actually mean with the revolution in VDI landscapes? That means we see there's an uptrend of using WVD as replacement for former VDI environments, landscapes such as Citrix or VMware. But we see that most customers really want to know how it works with collaboration tools like Microsoft Teams. And that's what we're going to discuss today with everything you have to know to get started. And what I have for you in today is that you will first of all learn what is Windows Virtual Desktop and how does it enhance the Microsoft Teams, or how does it enhances, or Microsoft Teams enhances the WVD feature set. We will learn which features will impress your security department. I have a few tips prepared for you that I always recommend to my customers. And I will show you a trick that will save your proof of concept, because I found out that there's one mistake nearly every organization does. And I see that really in 99% of my customer interventions that they do the same mistake. And I think it should be the right time to show you exactly what I mean and how you can prevent that before running into the trap with your own customers when it comes to a proof of concept with Windows Virtual Desktop or even a production environment. And last but not least, I show you how you can implement all what I show you today in just a quarter of your lunch break. That means we will also focus on the automation side of things. How can you automate the Teams deployment for VDI workloads or Windows Virtual Desktop on Azure in particular? And I will show you some tricks that can really get you up and running in just 15 minutes. So I think it's getting time to start with the topic, and a little bit or a short introduction about myself. My name is Patrick. I'm coming from Germany, and I'm an MVP for enterprise mobility in the WVD space, and also a Parallels VIPP. So I'm quite active in the community when it comes to Windows Virtual Desktop and supporting Neil McLaughlin and Stefan Dingemans as well in the international WVD community, which is a community we built up throughout the last year, which is quite successful and a centric point if you have any question around Windows Virtual Desktop. I'm also organizing the WVD Tech Fest together with my Swedish friend Simon Binder and leading also the German WVD user group. So you see there's a huge movement when it comes to Windows Virtual Desktop, and we're always happy to welcome new faces. So really happy to see one of you as well when it comes to our monthly meetups from the WVD community. And that's so far about myself. Let's talk about Windows Virtual Desktop. How can we define it? What is Windows Virtual Desktop? Actually, you can say that WVD is a virtual desktop to dynamically deliver applications and desktops when and however it's needed. That means you are quite flexible in your deployments to deploy applications and desktops throughout Azure whenever it's needed. And the speciality, or what makes WVD so special, is that Microsoft is really taking over the complete infrastructure parts when it comes to the RDS environment, at least. And this is what you can see here on the slide. Actually, we're talking about the web access, diagnostic services, the gateway, or even the session broker, including the databases. This is something that Microsoft takes over entirely for you, and you just need to manage a few other services when it comes to the computing resources and everything that is requested by the end users. And this is what you can see here in comparison to what Microsoft is doing. So you as an end client or your customers are responsible for the virtual machines that are used for Windows Virtual Desktop, the storage, which is needed for user profiles or applications, the automation part, which means when do you want to start up and shut down machines on the fly, something like this, the logic apps and the automation account behind it, as well as the networking. Those are the components you have to take care of when we talk about Windows Virtual Desktop. From my personal perspective, it's already very helpful because when we see those infrastructure components that Microsoft is taking care of, that's quite a lot already to maintain. And also from the security perspective, something very interesting why to choose Windows Virtual Desktop. But I will give you some more reasons in the next coming slides. So, because when I discuss with customers, I see that most of them don't even realize that they are already eligible for Windows Virtual Desktop to use the service itself. And what that means is that it's already integrated in most of the Microsoft 365 subscriptions customers own. To be more precise, we are talking about the E3, E5 license, but also the A3, A5 and student licenses include WVD as a service already, as well as the Windows 10 licenses, or you could even subscribe to an own subscription, which is called the VDI per user license. But what is actually included when we talk about WVD? Okay, we know we are equipped with a Microsoft 365 license. What is for free then, or what can we use then? And first of all, or a good argument is Windows 10 Enterprise Multi-Session. And this is an operating system Microsoft has created for the purpose of Cloud VDI. And it allows you, like with a Windows Server system, which has the RDS role, to operate with multiple users on the same operating system as well. And this is a huge, huge advantage when we talk about cost optimization, about general benefits, about density of users, or provisioning and streamlining the end user experience, as we can have multiple users working on the same machine in our Azure cloud. You also benefit from automation, which is about to be built into the WVD landscape. Microsoft released a few weeks ago a feature called Start VM on Connect, which allows you to shut down the VMs in the evening and let users start the VM when it's needed. Something like this, as just an example for automation, is already part of the suite, which is already equipped with when you have the license in place. And what you have to know is that because we're just talking about the service, but not about the virtual machines, as those are not included in the license set. That means that customers still need to pay for the virtual machines that are used in the Azure infrastructure, which means if you wrap up a new virtual machine running Windows 10 Enterprise Multi-Session, you actually only pay for the resources you consume, not for the licenses. And a huge advantage you have while using or while being equipped with such a license is that you benefit from FSLogix as your user profile solution as well. And you will see throughout this session that FSLogix will be a key or a major part of the implementation when talking about Microsoft Teams. Not only for the user experience, also to make the life of an IT administrator much easier when talking about shared services in the cloud in terms of VDI. And with that said, let's have a look at what do you have to know when we talk about Windows Virtual Desktop. And there are a few declarations you have to know, beginning with a workspace. And a workspace is actually the collection of desktops and applications an end user can see when starting the remote desktop application. This is the application you actually use to connect to a Windows Virtual Desktop. And this can be created from the Azure Portal, as you can see here on the right side. So this is really the very beginning. The workspace, this is the place where a user can see those apps and desktops. When we continue to be more precise, we need application groups, which is a kind of comparable feature to security groups in your Azure AD. Actually, it's a bunch of desktops or applications you could potentially make available for your end users. And you first of all define those applications, and on the other hand, you define who has access to it. You can use Azure AD security groups or even assign single users to that application group to grant access. And this is how you actually, from the workspace, grant access more granular to the applications and desktop collections if you have more than one. And last but not least, we have something called a host pool. And I would describe a host pool as a collection of virtual machines called session hosts to provide the end user power. That means the computing resources behind the logic of Windows Virtual Desktop. And you have some benefits compared to classical RDP environments, such as advanced control through RDP properties that allow you to define which device has access to my future VDI environment, or even more precise, I only want this type of device to be redirected to my VDI landscape. And you can benefit from something called MSIX App Attach, which is Microsoft's recently in GA announced application delivery method. And this allows you to simply deploy applications on the fly without installing them. As MSIX App Attach would be a topic for itself, we will not talk about this today, but that should give you a general overview of what do you have to know about Windows Virtual Desktop when we're talking about the service. Starting from the Workspace again to summarize, which is the place where users can see what kind of resources are provisioned. You have the application groups where an AT administrator can specifically say which user or user dedicated group has access to which resources. And last but not least, we have the host pools, which provide the computing power behind and where we can define some more granular security controls. Next, we talk about FSLogix. And Microsoft has acquired the company FSLogix in November 2018 to exactly integrate it somehow in Windows Virtual Desktop. And FSLogix gives you the ability to benefit from a unique user profile experience. That means when you or an end user connects to the WVD service, he most likely gets connected to a virtual machine. I think that's obvious. And from over here, we need some storage in the cloud or wherever you want to store it. I give you some recommendations afterwards, where you can store, first of all, your user profile. And this, the next one, is a specialty for FSLogix, an office profile. So when talking about FSLogix, we have two types of profile, the user profile and the office profile. So where's the difference? The user profile gives you the same abilities like a local user profile on your Windows 10 PC, which means the actual user profile gets containerized into a VHD or a VHDX container and simply being attached at the logon to the multi-session or operating system, to the virtual machine in general. On the other hand, we have an office profile, and this is a dedicated VHD or VHDX again, which provides offloading of caches for Microsoft Teams, for OneDrive for Business, etc., to provide a very good end user experience while logging in. As you know, there might be a lot of data when we especially talk about OneDrive for Business or Teams, it doesn't matter actually, and that reduces the logon time if we try to connect to a virtual machine of our choice when using the WVD service. And with FSLogix, it's a simple attachment process like with a normal VHD or VHDX file, which is simply being attached at the user logon. This reduces the time and helps also to get organized, as we don't have to maintain the typical problems of roaming profiles like we know that from the past. All right. And the next question would be, okay, now that we have virtual machines, we talked about FSLogix and some capabilities of Windows Virtual Desktop, where can we actually store those FSLogix user profiles? And are there any problems, any known issues with that? And this is what we're covering now. So when talking about FSLogix, you know that we have to store it somewhere. So the storage options we have are on Azure Files. That means a storage account with Azure Files where we can provide actually the location for our user profiles and Office 365 profiles to be stored. Additionally, we could use Azure NetApp files. And last but not least, a normal file server VM that we wrap up in Azure, which is a virtual machine simply equipped with the file services. So now that we have those three options, what is the best option to go for, especially when talking about WVD and Microsoft Teams? And that's a question I get often asked by my customers as well. So how can we differentiate what is the best solution? Actually, what I recommend is always to check how many or what is the need of storage size for your Azure files or for your storage account in general. If you have less than 4 TB, you're definitely good to go with Azure Files. If you need ultra performance, how it's being called at Microsoft, or more IOPS or more storage than 4 TB, you should definitely go into Azure NetApp Files. Azure NetApp Files is a solution that also provides you kind of the same capabilities than Azure Files, but the difference is that it starts from 4 TB per file share. So that's very important to mention that you have not the possibility to have a lower or a smaller file share. You really start at 4 TB, and this is important to know. So from those three options that we have, which one is now the good one? I would definitely go for Azure Files. And this has multiple reasons, actually. First of all, you have AD authentication, which means that you can join your storage account into your local Azure Active or into your local Active Directory to benefit from already existing security groups, which means that you potentially don't even need to create new security groups in your environment, and you can directly use those that are existing in your Active Directory environment and leverage them to use it in Azure files in the cloud. And additionally, this is a feature which is not available in all regions yet, but in Germany, I was lucky to test that already, which is called SMB multi-channel. An SMB multi-channel allows you to establish, or an end user to establish, multiple connections to that storage account, and it gives you the ability to to benefit from a much faster performance than if it's not enabled. And something that you have to know when talking about storage accounts is that depending on the size you need, the performance varies. That means the more storage you need, the more storage you allocate for your Azure files, the more performance you get. And this is something very important to mention because we have a lot of proof of concepts where potentially only 10 users are needed and customers are calculating the storage quite small. And they are wondering why the performance isn't that good in the very beginning. So calculate carefully, but I will give you a good resource at the end of my session as well that helps you to identify the right solution for your proof of concept or production environment. So far when it comes to the storage accounts. If you have any question, I'm happy to answer them after the session as well. Just paste them in or put them in the chat and we will cover them later. But now let's talk about the promised security features that can help you to impress your security department, starting with screen capture protection. And this is a feature that really helps it helped me already to win some projects in the WVD space, because this is exactly what customers were searching for so long. And this helps you, especially in terms of Microsoft Teams, to prevent third parties to make any kind of screen captures or video recordings from what they do in your WVD or VDI environment. And this is a feature exclusively available to WVD yet. And this can be enabled by simply adding a registry key, which you see here on the lower left corner here. And it simply prevents the user or the external consultant or whoever's using the WVD desktop from stealing or capturing any kind of data. And it's really, really cool. Actually, there's a funny story about that because people asked me how to enable it, if I can present it. Actually, as the name already says, when you enable it, it will prevent you from capturing any screen. But for the purpose of testing, I did it at the user group. And of course, I was not able to share my screen anymore because it's completely transparent. So the feature is working quite well, and I can highly encourage you to check it out. It's really easy to implement by group policy, for example, and it helps you so much to get, also some kind of support from the security department when it comes to what are the capabilities or the arguments for Windows Virtual Desktop. Another feature that I really like, or what I see, or where I see a great improvement in, is the granular control using the RDP properties from within the Azure Portal, which means you have a new option here, or new options to really granularly say which device do you want to redirect or allow to redirect to your WVD landscape. Starting from the microphone redirection, when it comes to the video encoding, to clearly say, okay, I just want to have that performance, or to save some bandwidth in some regions where the bandwidth is not given, such in big cities, for example. You can even enable a higher compression or a lower compression to get a better quality finally. And you can granularly say which kind of cameras, which types, you can even define the camera type you want to redirect to your WVD environment. And this is key when it comes to the controls, or to really argue against your security department to say, okay, these are the features that speak definitely for Windows Virtual Desktop compared to other solutions that don't include or don't have these capabilities in their VDI feature set. And those help us definitely to go for Microsoft Teams as well, as without a camera, it would be the experience, or the user experience wouldn't be the same actually. But I'm going to show you that in just a couple of minutes in my practical demonstration to show you exactly how you can enable this in just 15 minutes or even less. But now we're talking about something that was a pain point in the very beginning when talking about WVD, and this was actually the performance of Teams calls when having a phone call or just a video call over Microsoft Teams. That was actually a big pain point for some customers, because the virtual machines where you are operating on were actually responsible for encoding all that video traffic. And as you know, we have a higher density because we're not, or we enable users to work on the same operating system. That will consume a lot of hardware resources and will slow down the machine dramatically. But Microsoft has enabled a new feature, or allows you to use a new feature called the webRTC driver, that actually, first of all, encrypts the video traffic from the virtual machine and offloads it to the virtual or to the endpoint you are working on, and actually does the encryption and the offloading again on the other side where your recipient is actually on the phone with you or in a video chat with you. That means the webRTC driver is responsible for offloading the entire video and audio traffic to our endpoints finally. And this feature can also be described as AV redirect, audio video redirect. To make it short, video offloading to the local endpoint. And this is something that really helps us to simplify, as first of all, the argument to use Windows Virtual Desktop together with Teams, and also the user experience, which is important to introduce new technologies like WVD here. But what are actually the prerequisites before installing Microsoft Teams in WVD? Are there any known issues? And this is something very important for me. And when I did the session this afternoon as well with the German track, or on the German track, many of those colleagues that were joining didn't even know those features and didn't even know that there were known problems with that, or were facing these issues but just don't know how to resolve them. And first of all, starting with the FSLogix profile adoption. And I mentioned it earlier a little bit, that FSLogix is key for a good user experience in Microsoft Teams. First, not only for Teams, but also for the lock-on improving time, or the lock-on times, or the improvement of the overall user experience. But what you have to know, or what you see when, or what I see when I go to clients that say, okay, we use WVD, we installed it in the correct mode, but still we see that our profiles are nearly exploding. Like this example, this is just a screenshot I was able and allowed to take from my customer, where a user, which is actually new, that's the first time he was logging onto his WVD environment, was seeing that his profile, when starting Microsoft Teams, was exploding up to 4 GB while doing nothing. It's an empty profile with nothing inside, freshly installed or freshly logged into the WVD environment, and we see it's growing to 4 GB. And this is due to a profile flooding due to the Teams cache. How can we resolve this? Actually, it's pretty simple, but you just need to know where to start. And this will be done by redirection exclusions. It's actually an XML file that you just need to deploy via group policy, and that helps you to shrink your user profiles to a minimum. And when I say minimum, we're talking about 300 megabytes. Next is what I see quite often when customers are not able to install Microsoft Teams. This is most likely due to the fact that a registry key, a so-called WVD identifier, is not set correctly. And this can be easily done, like I said, by setting up the right registry key. And this is what we're going to see in the demonstration in a few minutes as well. And last but not least, it's the performance optimization. And when talking about performance optimization, I'm talking actually about the webRTC driver to allow us to use AV redirect. So what I showed you a bit earlier, that we have the encoding and offloading of the video and audio capture finally to the local endpoints. And then we need to, when all those prerequisites are done, and when we have figured out what we need to do when something like this happens, we need to make sure that we install Microsoft Teams in the correct mode. As you know, there are multiple ways of how you can install Microsoft Teams. One time it's the standard installation method, where you have the per user mode. It installs itself into the local app data folder, etc. But this is definitely something we don't want to do when we're talking about multi-user sessions or session hosts. And then we need to pick the per machine mode. And how this is being installed is what I'm going to explain you now. So we need to have the Teams MSI file downloaded from the Microsoft Docs page and simply install it with MSI exec/I and a parameter called alluser=1. And then finally, it will install Microsoft Teams into the local program files, Microsoft Teams folder, and you should be fine to go. But something that I get asked also quite frequently is, what does it mean? I see so many tutorials, so many manuals, and everyone is using all user equals 1 and all users equals 1. Where's the difference? And I think it's very important to understand that all user equals 1 means that you install Microsoft Teams in a per machine mode. While on the other hand, with all users equals 1, it's an identifier mode to know, okay, Microsoft Teams has been installed in a per user mode probably, and we need to revert that and change it to the per machine mode. In this case, it makes sense to use both of the parameters. But in general, if Microsoft Teams is not part of your golden image, for example, it's sufficient to go for all user equals 1 over all users. And by the way, all users equals 1 in itself, for itself, is not working in VDI environments, except you use it in combination. And this is how you can simply and successfully install Microsoft Teams. Okay, now that you know how that works in the theoretical mode and very manual mode, okay, you have to know many things. You have to install, or first of all, enable the registry key, followed by the webRTC driver. Then you have to take care of this and maybe exclusions in FSLogix. That's quite a manual process. How can we streamline this and simplify the overall experience while installing Microsoft Teams? And I've written a quite easy PowerShell script to help you installing and downloading and doing all of that stuff in just that PowerShell script for you. So you just need to run it, and the registry key, the prerequisites, and Microsoft Teams is getting installed in the correct mode. The only thing that you have to take care of before you install or before you deploy Windows Virtual Desktop then to your users is to make sure that the FSLogix exclusions are set. And this is the only prerequisite you have to do by yourself. In the end, you can just run that script and you're good to go. But that's not enough. Actually, I am writing a blog post currently that is about to be released at the end of the week on how you can wrap up a complete golden image with Microsoft Teams enabled in the correct mode via Terraform. And Terraform allows you to simply deploy infrastructure on Azure via infrastructure as code while defining a virtual machine extension. So it's actually a PowerShell custom script extension that is being added to the virtual machine you create on Azure, and that allows you to run Microsoft Teams from the very beginning in a very streamlined way, and it just takes you 6 minutes in deploying a new machine with Teams correctly configured and installed on it. And this really helps to streamline, like I said, the complete process of getting started with Teams in virtual environments. And I think we talked enough about the theory, about everything that you need to know before installing, and we can now jump into the demonstration where you will actually learn how to install Teams manually on one side, but we also run the PowerShell script on the other hand, that you see what is the fastest method to go forward. And last but not least, we will check how you can verify that Teams is correctly installed on your systems. And last but not least, we will take care of what are the next steps actually, and what do I need to enable from the FSLogix side or from the Azure Portal. With that said, we will now jump over to the Azure Portal where I'm already logged in. I would go to the first side and you see the Windows Virtual Desktop service already here. So I click on this. I navigate to one of my host pools because I want to change the RDP settings to be able to use my camera and my microphone later on in the session. And I select, like we learned earlier, one of my host pools. In here, we have the RDP properties, and we can simply select the device redirection to verify if all the settings are correctly set for my Microsoft Teams action later on. So you can see audio capturing is enabled successfully, the encoding of redirected video, the compression. We want to play sound on the local computer because we want to make sure that we hear it through our Surface headphones or any kind of headphones you're using. And the redirection of cameras is also enabled. That's good so far. So prerequisite 1 is given, that from the actual Windows Virtual Desktop service, we allow users to choose their microphone and their camera in their sessions. Now we can switch over to my Windows Virtual Desktop environment and we open up my domain controller because I want to show you how to enable those redirections so that you don't run into the trap of seeing those user profiles explode. And this is a task you definitely need to do before you enroll users or before you let users use the WVD environment. And you can see in this redirections, it's just an XML file. I'm going to share with you a blog article I've written that you can take it for your environments as well. You just have to exclude the team's cache folders, like the service worker, the cache, logs, and media stack, to not let the user profile explode like you have seen it in the screenshot a little bit earlier to 4 GB, for example, at the first startup. And actually, you need to place this XML file somewhere on your system or somewhere which is accessible via group policy as well. And we can go into our group policy management, open up the GPO. I've redefined one. We navigate to computer configuration, policies, administrative templates, and go to FS Logics. In here, we can select profile containers because it's a setting at a profile container level we have to do, and click on Advanced. And here you will be able to see provide redirect XML file to customize redirections. And a question that I get often by my customers is, okay, I've given the path to my redirection XML file, but it's not working. It's simply not working, this policy. And I always say, please have a look at the description, because it's not asking you to provide the exact path to your XML. It just wants to get the folder, and it will search for the redirections XML file by itself. So you just need to provide the folder, the UNC path to the folder, not to the file itself. And this is something you have to know before you start doing this. And with that being said, and when that's done, you're good to go. We can actually have a look at the Teams installation on our golden image. So I've prepared 2 machines for you now. First of all, a machine where we can check out the automation, and one machine where we can do the manual installation of Microsoft Teams. But let's start with the automated one. You see, I have my script already in place. I will make this script, of course, available to you after the session, and you can simply open up the PowerShell, run it as an administrator, select yes. And we can go to the folder and simply run the script. Wrong keyboard enabled, but that's not a problem. And we can simply execute it, and it will do the magic. We will have a look at this a little bit later, as we are now checking how to install that manually, so that you can see that Patrick is really keeping his promises that this is actually a media optimized WVD or WVD optimized Teams installation. So we switch back to the other session host, and we are first starting with the registry key, which is required to be able to let the Teams installer identify that we're here in a virtualized environment. So we need to open up the registry editor. In here, I navigate to Microsoft Teams, and you will most likely see that the Teams key is not yet present. So this is something you need to create. You can also do this by group policy. So you just create the key Teams. So you have Microsoft Teams, and all you need to do is create a D word is WVD environment equals 1. And that's all you have to do from that as a prerequisite on the golden image, for example. Now we can switch back to our installation files. I've already downloaded them from the Microsoft docs, such as the webRTC driver for our audio and video redirect and the Microsoft Teams installer to be installed in the per machine mode. But now we're starting with the webRTC driver for our audio and video redirection. I accept the license terms, click on install. And once this is done, we can open also the PowerShell on this machine as an administrator. Click yes. And switch the folder. And all we need to do here is use MSI exec/I, path to our Teams MSI, and define all user, as we have learned, equals 1, because there's no previous installation of Microsoft Teams on our session host or on our golden image, so we can install it like this. And you will see that there's no error message saying it can't identify the current environment. This will happen if you don't set the registry key. Like this, it will just pass through and Microsoft Teams will be installed in a few seconds. This will probably take a few seconds, but with all of those prerequisites set and defined, you will see that you will have a successfully deployed Teams environment without trapping into something with FSLogic's user profiles or such that you see that they are nearly exploding. So this is really important to know and to mention that you take care of it upfront. If you run into the trap already in the past, that's also not an issue, as there's a very good script by Jim Moyle available, which helps you to shrink those user profiles afterwards as well, if needed. But that's something you could definitely prevent. You see, Microsoft Teams has been successfully installed, and when I open it up and logging in with my user credentials, we can test and validate that the installation was successful. Take a few seconds and I can log on here with my user credentials and my password. And that will take a few seconds as well, as this is the first startup and our FSLogic's user profile is now checking if there are any redirections. And we can validate the installation by clicking on our icon. First of all, allowing the Windows firewall. This will take a few seconds until it's finished. But that's not a problem, as we need to hurry a bit. I will switch to my actual Windows Virtual Desktop host and show you what I wanted to show you, as this will probably take a few seconds. That you can go to About, click on Version, and with that you can see that the installation is WVD media optimized. And this is the proof actually that what we did was successful. And now let's check on the other session host, on the other golden image where we ran the script, if it's also successfully finished. And you can see that all commands executed, script now finished, and Microsoft Teams is also present on our desktop to be started. And this concludes actually the demonstration, what you have to know when operating Microsoft Teams and how it helps to improve the overall user experience or the admin experience while installing it on your session host. If there are any questions, I'm always happy to answer them now or even after the session. So please feel free to reach out then. Okay, that concludes the demonstration overall. And I think I'm also finished with my session so far. If you have any questions, would be happy to answer them. If you would like to connect for to answer you or to ask questions at a later point of time, I'm always happy to help. Like I mentioned, please feel free to connect via Twitter or LinkedIn or even YouTube or on my blog post where you can, or on blog page where you can find the blog post to Microsoft Teams. And yes, also feel free to rate my session to let me know what I can improve for future sessions. Thank you very much for joining me today. See you soon.